Okay. So, welcome everybody to Mentorship. This is the third in a three-part series intended to show our community, our cooperative community, the ways in which we're investing in the cooperative economy, and particularly through the Co-op Navigator Fellowship and that initiative. And we're hoping to give you an insightful behind-the-scenes view, introducing you first to our fellows in the first session, then to our host sites. And in this conversation, we're going to introduce you to some of our mentors and trainers, right? Some of the folks who are helping to initiate our fellows into the co-op economy or further into it. So that's what today is about. I'm going to share my screen in a second and give you, some of you who may not be as familiar with the program, a little bit of an overview. Okay. So if you have any particular questions throughout the process, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll be able to engage it at the end or as we go on. So the session is being recorded. You'll be able to access it after. If you'd like to be hidden, feel free to do so. Otherwise, let's begin. Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen now. So for those who may be unfamiliar, last year, CFNE was very excited to announce the launch of a new fellowship program for emerging cooperatives and co-op developers across the Northeast. All right, we launched last summer, and we launched after co-creating for several months with our co-op community representing Black communities, Latinx and immigrant communities, Indigenous communities. We were working with these partners, these organizations that are place-based and community-based, to identify a solution or a way to approach some of the problems we were seeing, some of the problems that we recognize could only be solved together, right? Ecosystem level problems. And we decided to take a step towards a future that we all believe in through this 3-year fellowship, right? And so that's the Co-op Navigator Fellowship. It's a 3-year program where CFNE is partnering with select community-based economic development organizations, right? These are homegrown, representing the communities they're trying to serve and have deep empathy for those communities. And they're located across the Northeast. And those community-based organizations are going to partner with us to hire, train, and mentor local co-op interested organizers and entrepreneurs. So folks who are on the ground, curious about the co-op economy and how it could help them to solve problems in their community, whether they're oriented as an organizer or an entrepreneur. And these individuals are going to serve for these 3 years as co-op navigators. Over those 3 years, we're creating a community of practice where fellows are able to receive that mentorship training and connections to trusted co-op development professionals who do have that competency, who do have that empathy, right? And those are the folks we're going to hear from today. And ultimately, we're hoping that through these relationships that the fellows are cultivating and that we're supporting in forming, that the fellows will be able to expose their respective communities to co-op initiatives, to models of cooperative enterprise that can work for them, and models that the host sites can adopt and use to build their capacity as they wish to engage further in cooperative enterprise. Fellows are going to study successful co-op models, and they're going to help their communities identify co-opportunities to embed these learnings. So fellows are going to not only learn from models across the country and have been learning about models across the country, but they're going to try to identify an opportunity to engage their community in creating a co-op enterprise or a project that leverages these skills. And that capacity is we're also hoping to extend that capacity to the host sites as well. So communities engaging in cooperative enterprise and being inspired by these models, and host sites building their capacity to engage in this work. And we're engaged in this work, CFNE, the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, because we recognize that this nation has a history of racially motivated economic exclusion. And as it pertains to the cooperative economy, it's left emerging communities across the Northeast with limited access to culturally relevant co-op development, right? Folks who want to engage in cooperative enterprise don't always have folks who get it, who can understand what they're dealing with in their context and to help them move forward on their journey. So that's what we recognize, and we're hoping this fellowship helps us. And so that's why we've dedicated over $800,000 to kickstart this 3-year initiative, 2 years of which are funded, and the third will be a collaborative funding opportunity. And so we're hoping that all of this investment in the fellows and the mentors and the host sites helps us to change the face of the cooperative movement. And so that's what we're really hoping to accomplish with this fellowship. If you guys want more, you can check out our previous conversations with the fellows. You can search Meet the Fellows. We also have previous conversation with the host sites, right? Meet the host sites, investing in community. And those links should be available to you guys as we wrap this up and for you to check out next. So that's a bit of an overview about the program. If you got any questions, drop it in the chat. Maybe we can engage it at the end. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to invite up some of our fellows, our mentors, to start to engage this conversation about how we're changing the face of the cooperative movement. Welcome up, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Three or four, one more. Okay. 5. Excellent. So welcome, guys. How you guys feeling today? You guys all right? Some nods? Nice. Some thumbs up? Excellent, excellent. All right, so excited to speak to you guys and to share a bit about the work we've been doing together over the past couple months. You guys have all served as mentors to our fellows in this program, and you've also served as trainers. So a little bit of context to kind of disambiguate those two terms. When you're invited to serve as a trainer, you're imparting a skill, right? You guys have it, right? Co-op development, business development, conflict resolution, it's assessing your ecosystems, all these skills that we're doing. But what's been more important to us has been the mentorship aspect, right? And we're defining mentorship as a guide, someone who's helping others navigate a process based on their lived experiences. So much of the value that we're capturing in this is the fact that you have navigated this space as someone who it was not necessarily designed for, right? As a member of the communities, we're hoping the fellows are able to engage. And so you are kind of, our ultimate goal here, right? We need more of you guys in the world. And that's what we're thinking about when we're thinking about mentorship, right? Learning from the lived experience of others, you guys who are able to show the way as it pertains to navigating the cooperative economy and helping people to solve problems in their communities, right, in ways that are natural for them using the co-op model. So I want to give each of you guys a chance to talk about the world you're seeing today, right? We know there's not many of us, and we know that the co-op model is changing as it's interacting with some of these emerging communities. So I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself. Just introduce yourself, the organization you're with, and the communities you're serving, and some of the things you're seeing. Okay, I'd like to start with Shante.
Welcome, everybody. How y'all doing? Y'all good? Okay, great. So as Johan just said, so my name is Shante J. Edwards, and I am the Entrepreneur Community Lead for Co-op. With Co-op, we serve an array of cooperatives ranging from Indigenous, Black, and Brown folk communities, right? Our grads include Navajo Power Homes, Kinfolk, Block by Block, Obron, and much more. The thing about what we do and what I do and enjoy doing is that we're all about the life of growing the pipeline and strengthening the ecosystem. You know, something that in thinking about kind of what is happening in the world and the challenges that I'm seeing in my role is money. Let's talk about funding. Let's talk about capital, and specifically resources that are cooperative specific that will support the scaling of those folks within our communities. Glad to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Trying to get those resources. Welcome, Shante. Love that you're here. Next, I'd like to invite Darnell to tell us a little bit about the organizations you're working with and what you're seeing in the communities you're serving.
Hi, everyone. My name is Darnell Adams. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts. I am co-owner of a worker co-op called the Firebrand, and we are a change management consultancy. We work with nonprofits, some mission-driven for-profits, and also cooperatives. Most of the cooperatives are in the food cooperative space, so you'll see that a lot of my discussion today will kind of go towards my experiences there. So, you know, I have a really interesting line of sight because a lot of my work takes me not only with working with Brown and Black communities who are looking to address their particular economic needs and wants through consumer cooperative, and sometimes in a hybrid situation, worker and consumer cooperative. But also a lot of my work takes me into spaces with funders and philanthropists. So I have an interesting kind of conversation with folks who can benefit from the resources that often don't get to them for whatever reasons it might be, and folks who have resources and don't know, are questioning the ways in which they can best deploy them, right? So I'm really excited for this conversation, not only in terms of thinking about resources in terms of, obviously in terms of money, but also resources in terms of information sharing, which I certainly think mentorship certainly speaks to. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Appreciate that, right? How do we circulate these resources? Loving that. Next, I want to invite up Pavel to talk a little bit about the work you're doing and the issues you're seeing in the communities you're serving.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am Pavel Uranga. I'm a Mexican, and I work with the Cooperative Development Institute as a coordinator director of immigrant services. We create the area of immigrant services just a month ago because of the needs in our communities. We're working in serving a lot of immigrant communities, and we realize the immigrant people is mostly with underserved communities and people who is usually invisible outside. It's not accounted in the census. It doesn't have part of the statistics. It doesn't part of the programs and the projects of support, and doesn't count with the money to start the projects in business ownership in cooperatives. And also we realize in this mentorship aisle of the programs, we realize we don't have mentors and co-op developers in other languages. We don't have developers in Spanish. We don't have developers in Bantu and so many languages, and we don't have in Creole. We don't have in French. We don't have in Portuguese. We don't, and not only in the languages, but also with the appropriate cultural approaching for the communities. So we decide to start training people to that, and that's part of the main purpose of the existence in the immigrant services. We are starting with, we don't have any money to do that. I am designing the program and also attending clients and also bringing amazing projects to CDI with the powerful immigrant communities. We have a beautiful project from Mexican workers in a dairy farm, and we are trying to buy the farm to be the very first Mexican dairy farmers in Vermont. So we have beautiful projects. We have amazing communities, people producing tortillas in Connecticut, people trying to get rid of the stigma of being incarcerated in Black communities in Rhode Island. And most of the people doesn't have any money to start the projects. And they need support, and they need the ways to do that. And that's why we are trying to create these programs, and that's why we are needing for starting a fundraising process to have the resources to support that thing. That's my work.
Really appreciate that, Pavel. I feel like, you're speaking to that pipeline in the ecosystem and how it's evolving and how our organizations are evolving to respond to that, especially as we open our eyes to folks who have been invisible to this movement. And very powerful framing. Really appreciate that. And so I bring it to you, Ana Martina, to maybe expound upon that. Some of the things we're seeing as the co-op movement is evolving and interacting with these emerging communities and expanding itself into a larger solidarity economy. So tell us a little bit about the work you're doing and how you're seeing the world.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be in community, sharing and learning from other folks too. My name is Ana Martina, she, her, and ella pronouns. I'm originally from Mexico City, and I am a worker owner of Colmenar Cooperative Consulting. I also served for 6 years in the past as a membership director of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. So the work that I'm doing and the reason why I transitioned from being in a place that I was able to work and serve the larger community at the national level to decide to be transitioning into being a worker owner of a worker cooperative, I think it really came as a part to trying to live those values of cooperation as a peer advisor, as a mentor, as a facilitator, as a trainer, but trying actually to understand some of the challenges the worker cooperatives have to navigate. So I was really delighted when I was invited to participate in this fellowship program. The name I found it really fitting as navigators, because I feel like the work that we do is exactly that, right? Like we're kind of like sometimes seen as bridges in our communities and trying to bring the resources over there in some organizations with funding and some other resources to the communities that we are part of and that we're serving, right? And so that's kind of like the work that many of us end in doing when we come and we start speaking the language, right? We try to be the peers to the new folks that are coming into the country, right? And we end up also being bridges with other communities, with Black, Indigenous communities and other communities in the States. So I think that a lot of the work that we do as consultants in Colmenar is exactly that, trying to be that bridge and trying to be working in that gap, right? So when Pavel was talking about resources, funding, capital investment for cooperatives, many of the times the work that we end up doing is creating resources for people to build the skills around financial literacy, around developing skills to navigating conflict in a democratic, participatory workplace setting. That's a lot of the work that we do. And I think it is very important, the work that the fellowship has been doing and trying to help the fellows to try to be those navigators, those peers to other communities. I'm gonna drop a link on the chat that is the State of the Sector report that was published by the Democracy Work Institute in collaboration with the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives in 2021. And right now, these folks are conducting the new census for worker cooperatives and democratic workplaces in the States. And I think that this is really in connection to what Johan is mentioning, right? Like the importance of this fellowship and what it means, right? Where are we fitting in this larger ecosystem of solidarity economy and worker cooperatives and other kinds of democratic workplaces? Because the sector in the States is growing, right? It has a lot of potential and opportunity to really transform the space for our communities, really with a high commitment to racial and economic justice, right? And I think that when we see this report, what we've been seeing in the last 5-6 years is Black, Indigenous, people of color communities are coming to the model of cooperatives. This sector is wanting to grow, right? Like people is really coming to this model as a new potential for inclusion in the economy in our own terms. And I think that that's very important and relevant. There is a real opportunity that we have. And I think that the map is very interesting because it shows a larger sector in the Northeast. So we have a really important opportunity here to support the fellows that are working to strengthen this ecosystem.
Excellent, excellent. Really appreciate that, right? Giving us that broad view that things are changing. We're getting there, right? Something is happening that is different from before and probably similar to a long time ago, right? I like to think of it as a reemergence, right? So we're getting there perhaps again. And maybe I'd like to hear about that journey from your individual perspectives. How have you gotten here, right? Because we know that a new world is emerging, but let's peel back the onion a little bit and hear about your personal journey. So if you're open for it, Darnell, I'd love to invite you to speak on that first, right? Let's hear a little bit about your journey into the co-op movement, right? How'd you get here? Who'd you interact with? Who helped you?
Oh, yeah, I planned this from the beginning. I was in junior high and I said, what I'm going to do is work in the cooperative field. No, I did not. Did not happen that way. And I don't really know anyone who knew that, or maybe one person. Mostly it's kind of your life kind of moving on and somehow interacting with a cooperative and having it pique your interest. And that's certainly the case for me. And I was in many ways very late in some ways to this. So I was working as a managing director of an incubator kitchen here in Boston. And it was not a cooperative, it was a nonprofit. But I became very enthralled with how folks could come together for a shared vision, right? They all had individual visions in terms of building their own particular food business. But what I could see happen in that space was how people were interacting, gaining knowledge from each other, sometimes working in collaboration, right? The conversations that were happening in that space. And also the more formal role that the incubator was playing in terms of technical assistance, right? And actually having a real physical space for people to be, right? So there was all this kind of informal information sharing and then this formal way in which people were sharing. And that was really fascinating to me. And I was there for some time, but had the opportunity as I was transitioning out of that role, where the Dorchester Food Co-op heard of me. And at that point, they were looking to find a part-time project manager to work through some deliverables that they had for a USDA grant. And I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. I don't know anything about cooperatives really, but I can project manage, and it seems like an interesting thing to do for some time. It would be 6 months, which turned into 3 years. Anyway, But so I learned on the job, right? I had these deliverables to be able that they needed. And I was out there actually in the neighborhood, walking around Bowdoin, Geneva, having conversations and learning in some ways along with others about what is this cooperative thing and how could it make a difference in this community? How could it make a difference in people's individual lives? And so, yeah, it was certainly not by by design, but it was certainly deep learning quickly, and to say, oh my gosh, what I didn't know is that there's a place in here for me as well. And it wasn't always pretty. So there'll probably be points in this conversation which I can also talk about the difficulties that I have run into and still run into. But nonetheless, there was a space, there was an opening and a crack. And so that's how I came to be. And also you kind of think about such an arc from not knowing anything to somehow finding my space, a place where I am a consultant and also a mentor. So the shift happened quickly. So it speaks to both the opportunity that there is in this field as it is rapidly evolving. And then again, as I mentioned, as the conversation develops, I can also talk about what is also the hurdles that still remain in entering this field and having a seat at the table, frankly.
Excellent. Appreciate that. And invite folks to integrate that, right? Think about that journey that you're on. Where did you start, right? For our fellows, some are organizers, some are entrepreneurs. They're starting from very different places. And I see that reflected in you as well. So I want to invite up Shantae to tell us a little bit. You're unmuted. So I saw you.
You know, I did. No, you know, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. I got you.
Yeah,
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's amazing to go after Darnell because I don't know, Darnell, I'm probably coming into the cooperative ecosystem game a little later than you. So I'll support that. The thing for me is that I've always been passionate about meaningful change and creating sustainable solutions. And I've been fortunate to be in community with a lot of folks over the years. Like, humans are dope. The things I've done in life has been dope. So it's like I've always been about the cooperative life, but I really didn't know about it until about a year ago. And I'm not ashamed of it because, listen, my background is in social impact, participatory development, advocacy, youth development, nonprofit, education, politics. Listen, I'm a Jane of so many trades, but they all connect back to people, community, shifting, changing conversations. And being a part of the cooperative industry has changed my way of thinking about legacy, humanity, and people. Like, in addition to my role with Co-op, I'm a professor at I'm going to say NYU, New York University. So at NYU, and in that work, I teach a social entrepreneurship course. We talk about cooperatives. Being from Chicago, I mean, I've always seen so many opportunities where cooperative movements have been happening. And I've also seen some where they could have benefited had the community knew about it. My time in New York really allowed for me to see things a little bit differently and enhance this connection. We're serving Black and Brown folks to have successful lives and making change from the inside. So I've dibbled and dabbled in co-op spaces, but didn't get really involved, like I said, until about a year ago. And in doing so, I've been hooked. Being able to have this role with Co-op kicked off because of a grad who's a close friend of mine was like, hey, I think this is something you might be interested in. I was like, oh, really? Let me see. So again, community, right? Humanity, folks who know you, who've been around you. And since then, the depth of being able to go through understanding the importance of collective decision-making, understanding the importance of empowering one another, like how we move in the world. And the last thing I'll say about it is it's an honor and a privilege because I do believe in it takes a village, right? And so taking that energy and taking that to something we'll talk about later as it relates to mentorship. right? So holding that space and learning this knowledge now is something that I have the opportunity to not come into they don't have to come into the game late, like my students, the young folks that I've worked with, the young folks that I'm still working with, because I'm giving them that knowledge. I'm supporting them with that knowledge so that they can get educated earlier. So those entrepreneurs who are like, I'm looking for some way to change the world, don't worry, I got you. And being able to set them up for that. So thank you.
Fantastic. No, I appreciate that. You know, something you and Darnell talked about, just being people, doing work, and someone reached out to you, or, you know, this might be interesting for you. And, you know, to me, I love that about the cooperative movement as a whole, and, you know, in particular in our communities, just this fact that it's a human-centered enterprise, right? That it's about people, that people can grow and transform and become something you could have never imagined, right? And I just love that. So want to continue to extend, Ana Martina, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey, some of the hurdles you faced, and who helped you getting here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question, you know, because, you know, just even hearing what is being shared, you know, and what Shantae was mentioning, you know, of like all the spaces where you're being involved, organizing, right? When you look from the perspective of solidarity economy, I think for me, everything just comes together, right? Because many times I feel like, in my case, the work that I was doing organizing in Mexico was very connected to solidarity economy and cooperatives. And when you separate, right, cooperatives from solidarity economy, I think the cooperatives kind of like live a little bit more in the space of entrepreneurship, you know, economy, different ways to organize and create opportunities for people to be included. In solidarity economy, it's more of like a little bit more broad, right? When it can be the different ways in how we're creating strategies for mutual aid, for solidarity. And I think that's the space where I came from on the work that I was doing in Mexico. And it's funny, actually, because through this journey, I've been running into a lot of people that we actually might have crossed paths in the past. And that's the case with Pavel. Pavel comes from, and I will not speak for your own journey, Pavel, right? But like, we sort of like come in a way from movements also on organizing with independent media, from people that was building their own radio stations, right? And that's a little bit of my background, my organizing. And in those spaces, you know, we were organizing in a collective way, in a horizontal way. A lot of the skills of collectives, democratic participation, you know, are forms that we were engaging with. So that's a little bit of my background, right? When I came here to the States, I was already, you know, as I was mentioning before, this bridge, right? Like of the work that is happening here in the States, the work that still happens in Mexico and other communities in the South. And some of the work that I did previously was supporting infrastructure of cell phone towers and systems for indigenous communities in the south of Mexico. And those communities where the government, it's not interested in invest because it's not really creating a profit, right? So it is more of a way to creating access from the organizing of their own communities. And those efforts were organized in a cooperative way. So, you know, that kind of like brought me a little bit once again into the spaces of community media here in the States, and cooperatives. To me, it's always been a little bit of part of this whole solidarity economy, right? So I think that, you know, a lot of people have support me, you know, and I have supported a lot of people in this journey. I think more on the way of organizing, learning, and unlearning a lot too. I think that this is the path too. But in the last 5 years, you know, specifically, I think part of my motivation to be part of a worker cooperative, as I was mentioning, is because I was working with a lot of worker owners directly, doing trainings, facilitation support with the Federation of Worker Co-ops. And And just having that one-on-one relationship with folks, they are trying to start their own business, right? Because there are no other ways for them to be participating in the economy in the way that is just and dignifying. I think that that's really what brought me to the space of being like, yeah, I think that this is what it makes sense. So yeah, I think what I feel more now is in this space of mentorship, peer learning. I don't think that I will be here if it wasn't for all the other folks that I have encountered in this journey. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Appreciate that. You know, we're getting a sense of the various places people could be coming from, whether it's enterprise and academia, project management, or organizing in the solidarity economy. You know, we're seeing, as I said, that reflection, which is so important for our fellows, because they're coming from different places too. And I love hearing about that. So Pavel, I want to invite you up to tell us a little bit about your story.
Thank you. I'm going to try to be brief.
Okay.
Well, I came from a background from organizing. I started organizing when 1974 in 8th grade. Was in Mexico in the middle of the Dirty War, and back then in 8th grade, I was my principal catch me organizing a union with my teachers, and he expelled me from school because I was being inappropriate things. And in the organizing process, I learned very quickly we need to say our things out loud, and then I became a radio producer and journalist, and I started doing radio in 1979, and that's what I met Ana Martina and other colleagues doing radio and organizing, and I've been organizing people and doing radio in 7 different countries. And by training, I'm a forensic anthropologist because you need to live from something. And but I'm an organizer. So I came to this country with this background of being part in my childhood of a cooperative of consumers in the school, because we have a deep root in Mexico of having cooperatives since 1852 in the Constitution. We have the chance to have the mutualistic societies on that, and that mutualistic societies became in cooperatives, and we learned since we were kids to live with cooperatives, and then later I became some kind of advisor from cooperatives in Mexico, in Nicaragua, in El Salvador, in Guatemala, and then I came here and I started working as a director of a coalition of 9 worker centers in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and I realized immigrant worker centers, and I realized the main problem of the immigrant community in labor is the unfair treatment. These strategies from the business owner to hire undocumented people to steal their wages, to mistreat them, to commit harassment, to take advantage of them, and the solutions from the worker centers and the unions is unionize and organize the workers, and yeah, but still the bad strategy of business owners still there. So in that moment, I realized, well, we need cooperatives. We need to get rid of that bad strategy, but the bad business owner. And I start pushing with the worker centers on trying to have that. And well, long story, when I saw this work in CDI, I said, oh, that's my work. I came to CDI as a cooperative business developer a year ago. And then from that, I start pushing to creating our justice language process inside, because we don't have one. Now we have a program. And I start pushing to work myself with only immigrant communities. Now we have a program, immigrant services. And I I'm willing to work on this because it's a life commitment. I've been working, organizing people and working with people and creating community work. And in our ancestral ways, we do these kind of things always. In Mexico, we call that tequio, the community work together to do beautiful things. And in South America, people call that minga. The minga is also that community work, working with production and things. So this cooperative root is deeply rooted in our people, in our immigrant communities. And that's why for them, it's super easy to get that kind of things. And that's why I'm super committed to work with them. And that's why I'm here.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you. Again, just appreciating the different places that you all are coming from. Some of you have carried the torch of cooperation with you for quite some time, and some of you just picking it up. And it just speaks to kind of the diverse nature of this work, but the accessible nature of this work. And yet it's been not so accessible for so many communities. And so I want to talk about your journey entering into the mentorship space or developer space or whatever it is, and the mentors that you've had. What really allowed you to enter into this community of practice, right? So let's talk about that. So Ana Martina, would you like to start?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, like who we are learning from and how we are like also becoming these peer advisors, mentors, peer mentors. Yeah, as I was mentioning, there's like just so many people that I feel like I have learned from, and I can mention like some specific people, I can see the faces, people. I think Adria Powell, who is the CEO of Cooperative Home Care Associates. I don't know if this place is contested today, but it's like the largest worker cooperative in the United States. A Puerto Rican Black woman that has been organizing, in CHCA for so many years with so much strength, with so much like commitment. And I just think in Adria, it's like one of the leaders in the space that I really recognize and appreciate so much. Just even thinking, through the pandemic, the burden that was put onto workers, essential workers, and home care cooperatives were really, really struggling. To see the strength of a woman that is carrying all this weight, right, of like what we all went through, but also supporting like 1,000+ like women majority, owned business. It was very impressive. And I think that, that's one of the persons that I always think as a person to learn a lot of that strength, and I can mention so many worker owners in cooperatives. Also, I think that like so much of the learning and, this space of like thinking, discussing, where we're trying to go. I can just think of like some of the conversations that we have here in this fellowship with some of the fellows, right? When we're talking about what they are trying to do, how they're trying to work with their communities, conversations with Steph Wiley, right? Of like trying to access land ownership, what we're trying to build. Yeah, I mean, I think that so much of that is being really, it builds, every day. You learn something here, you carry with you, and then you can build those connections, you learn about resources that people are creating, or you understand of gaps that people are having in their journey, So some of the resources that we have created in the cooperative, we just recently created a guide for financial literacy for worker owners, because that's a real gap, right? We need to be able to access funding, financing, but we need also, as worker owners, we need to understand how to manage our own finances. how to even build these applications for accessing loans. So there are big gaps. So I think that in so many ways, you know, learning from those needs and from the strength of so many of those folks is, yeah, it's once again, you know, I keep referring to peer advisory and peer mentorship, and that way, yeah.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. I definitely see what you're saying, and you know, seeing someone like you that you could admire and look up to definitely gives you a strength that you didn't know you had. Want to invite in another to comment on that. Shante?
Yes, this is me leaning in. All right, so
Yeah,
here's the
yeah.
thing about mentorship. What's really amazing is that one thing that has really served as a key indicator for my success is mentorship. Earlier, Pavel had said about the kind of lane talking about organizing. It reminded me about the time I experienced my first political campaign and the shift in my soul. It was like I was out there, frontline, advocating, you know, for change. When I was a member in Bed-Stuy, right, in the neighborhood, like I'm pushing for the neighborhood because not only do I live there, I also work there, and I was working for the election of an assembly member, and it was so dope. The thing about it is that it takes me back to my mother, Marlene Edwards, who was an organizer, an advocate for change, fairness, and a pillar in our community. She did the work in school, she did the work in the community. And you know, what's amazing is that it never really hit me. Like my mom was out here making change, doing things, and she was essentially my first mentor, or is my first mentor. And that didn't hit me until after she transitioned, because I started realizing like, wait, okay, the reflection of her work, her passion, and her commitment to change, that's what I'm about. And it actually happened at her funeral, when folks had showed up and they were just talking about the things that she did. She was one of those folks, kind of like, I'm just silent. I'm gonna be in the background, but I'm gonna make some noise if I need to. No shade to anybody who's an Aries on this call, but you know, the passion, the fire, just saying. But one thing I like to say about mentorship is Bay. And what I mean by that for Bay is that relationship. It is something that's significant to being a key to growth and productivity. Something I said earlier was that it takes a village, right? So it takes the village. It's to each one teach one, we grow together. And the knowledge that has been gained over time has to be shared, especially for our young people. If you don't know, now you know. I'm passionate about the young folk because I think about who gonna take care of me, and I'm gonna need them to be good. And so in doing so, that being a necessary bridge for intergenerational relationships, Anna said something that was so clear: gap. That word gap. And we've heard that in different places. And Anna, thank you for that, because I think about that for what exists and what doesn't exist, right? So I want to invite you all just to take a moment to think about that. Gaps exist because something is missing. How amazing is it to close the gaps with the learning through mentorship? I think about how cooperatives are also, according to the definition when you Google it, right? They are the values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. When we think about co-ops and how the ethical values, honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others, it's the collective. That bridge, the fellowship, mentorship is passing that on. And something else I want to, take a moment to is I think about the principles, right? The co-op principles. I like them all, but two of my favorites, and as it relates to mentorship, are 6 and 7, which I want to read real quick. And I want you all to sit with this question for yourselves. Who have I intentionally mentored / held space for in the cooperative ecosystem? And so number 6, right? Cooperation among cooperatives. Cooperatives serve their members most effectively and strengthen the cooperative movement by working together through local, national, regional, and international structures. Number 7, concern for community. While focusing on member needs, cooperatives cooperatives work for sustainable development of communities through policies and programs accepted by the member. And so I pose this question for you all to consider. Who are you intentionally passing the information on to? And mentorship in this space is necessary, especially for our young people. Of course, in this collective, this peer-to-peer support, how are we talking about it? How are we living it in a way where it is our lifestyle and it shows? And being able to have those gaps filled in advance is going to support the advancement of the movement, the change in the future, and how it is that we're making it and we're being intentional about it. And being in space with each other like this. This is mentorship. As we're having this dialogue, we're learning things about one another and we're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. Oh, it's all in conversation. And so I pose to you all to consider moving forward each day, creating a conversation around cooperative development, cooperative knowledge that includes you in the space, because your legacy is right now. And that's what mentorship is about, passing on that legacy, keeping the conversation alive and keeping it moving and flowing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I completely agree. You know, we're inheriting a legacy, especially many of us who are diasporians. You know, our cultural basis is cooperation. And in this context, in the USA, we're somewhat rediscovering that, having not seen ourselves in a mentor who provided that missing piece. So let's talk about it. I want to invite Darnell or Pavel to comment on this. You know, when we think about those missing pieces, that mentor, those relationships that allow people to move forward in this journey, what have you seen missing, or what was there for you as it pertains to mentors? Darnell, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the word that sticks with me, particularly what Shantae was talking about, was intentionality. Right, like it just grabbed me. So I want to start there. So in this cooperative environment, I would say there are a lot of people who've been resources to me, that have been champions for me, that frankly have helped me stay in the field, because there was, you know, some moments where I wasn't sure if it was even the place that I should be, right? And people coming in various ways with either offers or reflections about what was valuable, that I was bringing to the field, that was different, that they wanted to champion, et cetera. And I would say the last time I had a relationship that was a formal mentorship was probably 20-something years ago, when I was working in like a startup technology company. No, actually it was biotech, right? Because there it was like a part of the field was like a norm, that if you were going to move through a company, if you were going to move your career in a certain direction, that you would need a mentor to be able to do so. And I've found less of that outside of industry. I have not. So while there's incredible relationships that I have outside in the food cooperative world, I think a much less intentional mentorship, certainly, that I've experienced. And so the opportunity when CFNE, and I want to give a shout out to CFNE, frankly, because there have been many touch points that I've had with various peoples at CFNE who have been the people who have said, you have something particular to offer. We haven't heard this before. This is really interesting. Say more, right? So when CFNE reached out to say, would you, well, I kind of came in as a trainer of sorts, right? But there's sort of this mentorship experience. I was like, absolutely, I'm gonna step in and do what I can. If I have information that's helpful to other people, I'm gonna share, right? But it's the first time that, frankly, I've seen myself as any sort of mentor. Like I didn't even have, I was like, oh, when did that corner turn? where like I'm the person who used to be just seeking out mentorship, and now that maybe I have something to offer, right? So there's a way in which CFNE was able to reflect something to me that I couldn't see for myself. And I would say that, for folks who are considering mentorship as how does it fit into growing and supporting a strong cooperative ecosystem, I do think that there is some things that industry does, frankly, I'll put it better, in the sense of saying there are careers here, right? There's opportunities here for people to come in and be productive, help their communities, help the sector, and we are not very strong yet in having more formal ways in which information is being transferred.
Excellent. No, I appreciate all that. And I'm going to take your cue, intentionality, right? How intentional is mentorship in our ecosystem as folks who are interested in, helping people work together to solve problems in their community, right? It should be there. We have principles about it, some of which were referred to by Shante, but how intentional is it, right? And so, Pavel, I want to ask you to share any thoughts about that intentionality or its absence throughout your long career.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was thinking when I start doing leadership in 1979, I was general secretary of one of the biggest students federation. I was behind me 75,000 people, and when I was there, I realized I don't like being there. I don't like being in front of everything. And then I step aside and I start learning how to help the people to be there. I don't like to be in the frame, in the front of everything. So when I start doing radio, I learn how to put the mic in the other people. When I produce in radio, you barely can hear me because my main intention was giving the chance to others to say the things. And when I organize, I've been organizing people to take the leadership in the processes. It's no easy thing to do because people love to put you in front of everything because you have experience, but yeah, we can help things to grow in different directions. And I'm an historian. I love to put some historical examples, and this country has a powerful history in cooperative movement from this Black movement in the late 1800s, and the mutualistic societies, and how this country became out of the Great Depression by the hands of cooperatives and unions, and this history was erased because of the ideology of the Cold War, and was forgotten, and we need to recover that, and that kind of powerful histories I've been learning from my mentors, and my mentors are the humble people who work in cooperatives. I never have an intentional mentor in my life to anything. Well, in academics, but that's other thing. I've been doing research in academics, so that's other things. I'm not talking about this. In my organizational process, I never have one mentor. So I learned from the humble corn producers in Nicaragua. I learned from the indigenous people who produce coffee in Chiapas, the Tzotzilotl cooperative there. And I learned from the Somali Bantu people who produce halal in Maine. Now I'm learned from the people who produce tortillas in Connecticut, and I learned from all the humble people who I work with every day. Every single day I have meetings with someone, I learn something. They are my mentors. So I can help to learn other people their ways to solve and fix problems and create cooperatives. And I love the uniqueness of each project, and that's amazing. How can we build things differently? And I love help people to learn. And probably I could be a mentor on something. I'm trying to create a program on training people, train the trainers in CDI to help people to develop cooperatives in other ways, cultural appropriate way in their other languages, and became part of their own communities and learn how to teach their ways of cooperative in their spaces. Probably that could be named as a mentorship, but I'm not seeing myself as a mentor. I'm seeing myself as an advisor, someone who can help other people to understand things and sit next to the people who has the wheel in the driver and give some advice, but they want to take the decisions, not me. So that's my way. That's my intentionality in this work.
Love that. Love that. So many gems in there. And, you know, one thing that really stood out to me was that mentorship is kind of always happening, right? By osmosis, we're kind of interacting with people, or parents, or peers, and it's never happening. It's so often unexpressed and perhaps even suppressed, despite the fact that we all need to learn and we all need to share and we all have something to share, right? And so you talked about knowing yourself and then sharing that gift, you know, in all these informal ways. But, you know, it's kind of something that's always and never happening. And with this fellowship, we've tried to create an intentional community of practice where some of these ideas can be intentionally expressed. The ideas that are coming from your lived experience, right? That is coming from the communities that we're serving, and recognizing their expertise, recognizing their value as, you know, contributing actors. So how is that relationship getting into this next world that we're trying to create, where mentorship is intentional, where we're passing down value intergenerationally in an intentional way? Want to hear a little bit about your experience interacting with this fellowship as we've tried to cultivate an intentional space for mentorship. Okay, want to start with Darnell.
Well, first, I couldn't be more thrilled when I heard about the fellowship. That it seems to me, in the deep thinking that CFNE has done over the years in terms of thinking about how they can best affect change in the Northeast in terms of cooperation, supporting the growth and the strength of cooperation, that this was one opportunity and tool that you decided to invest in. I think it's important. I think it also is a demonstration, perhaps to others in the field who might have the capacity, you know, to start maybe moving in some different ways and thinking about different ways in which we can support leaders. I think too, kind of there's all these different layers of how people see themselves in the cooperation space. All the panelists have kind of talked about our ways, the way that we got here, right? And they're all so different. And one thing that I did observed in terms of the fellows is that they too have also come to the space in many different ways. And they all value cooperation, but their experiences in this space, either they're coming to it new, or perhaps they've been around for it in it for a while. That there's like the fellowship it's a way to hold all of that, right? That people are kind of learning from all kind of in different ways. And so when I was able to meet folks and have conversation, it felt like to me the kind of a long-standing relationship in which you are able to deep dive into topics that are affecting folks, but they're going into their own communities to be able to kind of translate that into their particular scenarios, into their particular relationships. There's space for that. You can come back. What did you learn? What are you thinking about now? What other resources do we need? Who would we like to have speak on X thing? Like, so incredibly valuable, dynamic, and a space that is theirs, my sense. So yeah, I feel like it was a blessing to be able to be asked into that space and continue to be in relationship, and think about what might come of this, and also for the field itself, knowing that people are going to be looking at this and saying, all right, what are the ways that maybe it's not going to look exactly the same for other organizations, but what are the ways that we can actually support in this kind of way?
Absolutely. Appreciate that. It's not easy to own that mantle of a mentor. It seems like a big word, but folks are coming in as learners and teachers, and it's kind of an interesting place to be. Appreciate that. Anna, I want to invite you to talk, because you've come a few times as a mentor trainer, to talk a little bit about the relationships that are forming and the impact being a part of this learning community has had on you, and what's going on with you being a part of this intentional space of mentorship.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, same, I share that sentiment with Darnell, that when the email came, as an invitation for being part of this journey, I was excited and curious of what's happening, right? Like, what is the intentional work that we're trying to do? And I think that through meeting different folks that are working in, as you're mentioning, each one of them having the task to understand what's the ecosystem that they are working with, whether it's in Connecticut or it's in Maine or Massachusetts, and trying to understand how can I be this navigator for the community that is coming to ask me for resources, right? How can I help to direct people to the right place, to have the tools, And so I think that I was very excited to come in to bring some tools, throw some tools, have a little bit of conversation, and then spark the discussion. And I think that there was, it was actually in two of the sessions that I was very grateful to be participating in, leading the sessions, that you could see how like the thinking, the creativity of the fellows, they're coming together of like, well, I have the tools, now I can map out this, now can I understand, what is my role, right? Like, how can I connect people, how can I help people to understand if the idea that they're coming with to me is a cooperative, or what is it, right? Is it part of the solidarity economy? How do we approach this? Because so many of us, as Pablo was mentioning, we come from this world of organizing from specific needs to bring to our communities, and in the world of developing a business, right? To develop an entity that can be providing economical sustainability to you, to your community, but also overall a way of sustainable life. It's, not all of us came with that background of financial literacy. So I think that the coming and putting all this together and like brewing all of these skills, and making sure that nobody is being left behind is so important in cooperative space. Is so important, so essential, as Pablo was mentioning, right? In radio world, when you have the DJ, the person that is operating the mixer board, that knows how to connect the cables, the day that person is sick and is not presenting to put together the radio show, and the DJ comes, the MC comes to do the show, and a cable is disconnected and the buttons are not where they need to be, and that person doesn't know how to navigate the mixer board, it's chaos, right? You need the technician to be there to know how to connect, how to plug the cables. And we learned that in radio world, we don't want that to happen. So we wanted to make sure that everybody is trained to know how to connect the plugs and put and push the right buttons, right? So it's the same thing in cooperatives. We want to make sure that nobody is left behind with skills. We want to make sure that everybody knows how to respond to, conflict, to, their goal for responsibility, decision making, for financial literacy. And that's what we are trying to do here. We're trying to make sure the folks that are part of this fellowship have the tools to direct people, to those resources, to upskill together. So I think that it's beautiful what you were doing. And I'm very excited to see what this ecosystems in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Maine, how they're going to look like in 5 years. Watch, because it's going to be very powerful, I think.
Without a doubt, completely agree. I think we're going to see that change, and it's going to be in our face, as in our face as your beautiful faces are today. So looking forward to that. Want to turn it over to Shantae to ask, similarly, we're making an investment in our ecosystem by inviting in mentors and encouraging them to identify as mentors, right? Because of their lived experiences. But it's also the case that you're here now, right? You have roles within organizations that are providing this work, right? You've made it in. So I want to invite you to share anything about how we can continue to support this intentional act of mentoring, knowing that you also design spaces of learning through the accelerators and so on, right? How do we support mentorship within the context of these programs, and what are you seeing?
It's just doing what you're doing now, right? And what's really dope, right? Because at Start Co-op, I serve as a lead facilitator for our accelerator program, and it's something to see the development of humans and their value. I will say, I'm about to jump on this bandwagon with Darnell and Anna. And you know what I'm saying? When I received the ask and the email to be a part of this ecosystem of dopeness, I was excited, honored, and inspired. And being able to share perspectives regarding human-centered entrepreneurship and feel the energy of the fellows, you all, basically seeing yourselves in the cooperative ecosystem as the game changers was and is something that brings me joy. There's something special about the magic that happens, whether that's in session and conversation, especially when you're talking about the collective and being in community. One of my favorite quotes by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard is, "Cooperatives solve economic problems in different ways than conventional for-profit businesses. They operate on the values and principles of democratic participation, inclusion, solidarity, and sharing. These principles have positive implications for every racial and ethnic group around the world. And they've proven successful in urban as well as rural areas. Co-ops are also resilient. They develop and survive as a response to market failure and economic marginalization." That quote sits close to my heart, and the opportunity of being in space with you all and working with you all. And yes, like Anna said, watch out, because what's really dope is that this fellowship encompasses the next wave of entrepreneurs who are creating intentional and sustainable communities of impact. There is longevity here. And I personally believe that because collectively we experience a national global health crisis, right? Back in 2020, that's still here. And so the way that we've been able to weave through, how we've been able to take things and change things and shift things and all of the things has created this space of wanting to do better for humans. You all are doing that intentionally. And in being able to be in this space now with the knowledge that you're gaining around cooperative culture and ecosystems, like y'all are building that. And being a part of this community specifically is really giving me a lot of like hope and joy. And I those fuzzy feelings, you know, you get when you're like around humans who do amazing things. And there's a responsibility too, a responsibility for me to keep coming back, a responsibility for me to continue to stay connected with you all, and a responsibility for me to watch you all grow and see what you do, support what you do, and be a part of it in any way, shape, or form. So in advance, I say thank you to the fellows, and also thank you to CFNE for saying yes to me and being able to invite me into this space. It is an honor.
Fantastic. Fantastic, right? So we've talked about the world today, right? That there's not many of us, right? But we're here, right? And we're in positions where we can support the next generation. Some of us are in organizations that are building this capacity. Some of us are in organizations that have had this capacity and they're learning how to engage this work, right? But we're striving for a future down the line where our communities own this work, right? Where we own it. And when we think about that, we're talking about changing the face of the cooperative movement. Now, you represent that impact today. I want to ask, did you believe you would one day be the face for someone, right? And what more support is needed for us to go beyond the face, get some body in there? How do we further embody the spirit of cooperation in our communities in a way that our communities own it, right? So did you believe you were going to be the face for somewhere? And what support is needed to further embody this? Okay. So I'll start off with you, Darnell. You ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I was just gonna do the laughing emoji and just keep it moving, but no, of course not. Am I the face? I don't even know what that means exactly, but
there we go.
I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, but it's in my heart, so I'm going to say it.
Absolutely.
I want to go to the fact that we were talking about there's not very many of us. And I think there are various reasons for it, but I want to actually talk a bit about pipeline and experiences that people can have when they're entering into this sort of new space. And in that is there a place, kind of the answer, the question, and having an answer about whether the space is for them or not. And I've had both experiences. I've had sort of like arms open, like, yeah, a new kid around the block, come in. What do you have to say? What are you doing? To, frankly, still running into some gatekeepers, frankly, that were sort of like, I've been around, know you, like, what do you have to offer? And really making a decision at some point to being like, I think I'm out. Like I can do other things. I think I'm out. So kind of this idea of there not being many of us, it kind of reminds me of, I have a degree in education. People talk about the pipeline of teachers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if all the people who have left teaching went back into teaching, you wouldn't have a pipeline thing. Right. And it makes me wonder a little bit about even the cooperative space. Well, the people who started that were just like, I'm out of here because of any number of things that they've run into in terms of whether or not there's a space for them, whether there's not support, whether there's funding, whether there's lack of knowledge, whatever thing that kind of warrants someone where they're just like, you know what, I'm out. So I don't think that was the question that you asked, but I wanted to say, I think in terms of being the face, I don't know if I don't see myself that way, but I do feel strongly in terms of paying things forward. So for the experiences that I've had in which people have, it's not just about the cooperative work. It's very personal, like that all the ways in which, in some ways, this organizing and coming together can kind of heal places in us. Right? Like it's not just about work. It is about work, sure. But like, who am I as a person who has intrinsic value, that knows that wherever I am, I have some particular gift to lend, right? Which is not reflective in a general way in this particular country when I'm showing up in this particular body, right? Like, and so my experiences that have been more on the healing side, I'm like, I absolutely want to be able, if someone wants information, thinks I'm one to give it, that I am going to show up because I know how healing it has been for me, right? In addition to growing my particular career.
Absolutely. No, and that's right on in so many ways. What does it mean to be the face of the cooperative movement? In our context, we are the smiling faces that this new generation is encountering, right? But it's not enough to be a face, right? We're in different organizations and we're navigating those spaces, as well as the co-op economy that hasn't made a place for so many of our communities, right? And we are that first face in this context, and we want to take that a step further. So a minute or so, giving you guys the opportunity to talk about what does it mean to be that face, and how do we further embody, right? So just a minute. Anna, Martina, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I keep thinking, of like what brought me to this place was a lot of a curiosity to learn the things that were not accessible to me, the knowledge that were not presented, that were not at reach, and but I have the will, and I have the curiosity to go and reach to that, and so this is kind of like what it means to me, like being here in the space is not just for a personal purpose, but because once again we are bridges to our community. This is how we break these dams, so we can actually let it flow to the communities, and that's just what it is. So I'm very thankful to be sharing and learning and unlearning with you all. It's been really rich conversation today.
Thank you. Excellent. Want to give the opportunity to Pavel and Shante as well. 1 minute. How does it strike you? How does it being face or yeah?
I don't see myself as a face of a movement. I see the faces of so many people, so many cooperatives, and I make the effort every day to prepare them well to be the faces of the cooperative movement. And I'm not a cooperatives. I'm just a developer. I'm help them to have these powerful messages and these powerful images and this powerful training process on that, and trying to help them to take the lead on that. I'm happy to do that kind of things.
Excellent. That's exactly it, right? Passing that torch and letting other folks shine. Shante, the last word.
Being the face is an interesting concept. And I think that I'm still working through two things. How can I make change within my full time, and what cooperative should I start in the next year or so? It's like I'm aligned with what Pavel had shared earlier regarding helping people to learn the development process and how there is something brewing in the cooperative ecosystem. I just want to be a part of the community. Like, put me in, coach. And just thinking about that from the space that even Darnell mentioned regarding gatekeeping and how it's real and also unnecessary. And so my hope is that this dialogue inspires and empowers everyone to choose to share and to choose to gift others the knowledge of decreasing the gaps that Anna mentioned earlier, so that we can bridge the impact collectively. There's so much opportunity for the healing, as Darnell mentioned, that shifts generational trauma and invites healthy and productive unpacking. We need to let the load down and not be the bag carriers anymore. So essentially, let me support you and you support me so we can move forward together. And in closing that, that's kind of in my brain, again, two ways, right? How am I doing this full time in Start.coop land? We're working on something, an initiative I'm leading called Black Co-ops Matter. And in my personal land, I'm like, hey, email me, y'all see me over here, keep me in, coach. And in that, we're able to then break down the barriers and continue to move forward. So thank y'all.
Excellent. Excellent. And thank you so much for your time. That's time for today. And want to continue to invite you into this conversation and this process. We're so lucky to have you guys, and I'm excited for what we can do together going forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so in the chat, there's a comment around watching parts 1 and 2. The links are there. Feel free to check those out. They're very exciting. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us. Peace out.